All right, let's welcome back to Straight Fire one of the interesting guests. He writes a lot of books. He does deep dives, which are few and far between in sports media now. Seth Wickersham, ESPN, obviously made huge waves last week in the sports world with his latest book, which isn't out yet. But the Caleb Williams stuff. Seth, how are you, man?
I'm great. Good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to talk to you. Every time you do a book, massive news comes out of it because you're such a great reporter and journalist.
Um,
I've probably known you
Thank
at
you.
least 15 years.
Well, yeah, it's funny. We did that big lead interview way back when. That
Mm.
was a good throwback.
Yeah. I mean, you obviously are one of the foremost sports reporters who does deep dives. It feels like a lost art almost in sports media, just because
Mm.
the finances. It doesn't really make a ton of sense to have somebody write 5 articles a year. But when they're as good as yours, you can make it happen. So this, let's start here. What brought you to the idea of this book, which sounds super fascinating, and I think this is just the first layer of many that you got here, right?
Yeah, it is the first layer, and I mean, to be honest with you, and not to sound all Uncle Rico, but like the genesis of being like a failed high school quarterback, and me always wondering, you know, what it was unable to I couldn't quite comprehend how some of these guys do what they do, and I wanted to try to understand that on every level. I wanted to try to understand what it builds in you, what it strips away to do this job. I wanted to understand how it became so popular in our culture and why this very odd thing of throwing a football and throwing a spiral became this thing that very quickly put people on a level with movie stars, famous musicians, politicians, and it was like that almost from the start. And so I didn't write a history about quarterback, but I wanted to write about, in the realist way, what it means to do this job at every level, from high school to the NFL and college in between, and then what it's like to live with it in retirement when you're a Hall of Famer.
Hmm. That's deep. Let me ask you. So, a lot of people in sports media were either once athletes or they wanted to be athletes. I'm in that wanted to
Hmm.
be an athlete bucket, but like
Yeah.
I had my growth spurt and all that stuff. I didn't hit puberty till late, so I couldn't even make the high school teams. I played every sport growing up, and dude, it hurt so bad. But look where it got me to. I play in tennis tournaments and soccer and basketball leagues, and I talk about sports. I didn't know about this quarterback issue. So what were you starting quarterback? Did you not make that? Like, what was the story there?
Well, I had my design, like I had my mind set on it, and I was a starting quarterback for a period of time, and I wanted to try to unseat a varsity starter ahead of me, and I didn't. And me being in high school, it sent me into a little bit of a tailspin, and um, that's not what the book's about. But that's kind of my entry off point. It's
Yeah.
like wondering, and even the guy who started ahead of me, he played in college, but like even he had that kind of mysterious ability. Like I was really good in practice, and then when the bullets started flying, something, after doing it for a couple of years, but like on the varsity level, like something within me kind of broke down, and
Mm.
these you know things that I had committed to muscle memory didn't work. Whereas like he was like the opposite, where when the bullets were flying is when he became better and became one of the best in the state. And it's always stayed with me. But more than that, you and I talked when my Patriots book came out, and I got to know Tom Brady back in 2001, back before anyone knew that he would even finish the season as the starter. And it was kind of interesting because we were the same class in high school, same class in college, getting our career breaks at the same time. And it was kind of interesting to just see, as it turned out, the greatest player in NFL history standing with me at that moment. And he was the one, and he and Peyton Manning were the ones out of kind of like our era that ended up doing this thing at the highest level. And
Mm.
so anyway, there's a lot of quarterbacks that I write about in the book, current and former guys. I dive into the lives of some guys who aren't with us anymore, but I needed to, understand how they do it, anywhere from, memorizing a playbook to 2-minute drives to how they deal with all of the different hats you have to wear as a quarterback, from, you know, spokesman of a multi-billion-dollar organization to matinee idol to huge asshole at times. And, you know, what it builds in you, and again, what it strips away, and what are the things that you end up that stays with you when you're away from the game,
Mm.
and how compatible and incompatible are those with regular life.
Yeah. So Caleb Williams obviously is
Hmm.
at the center of last week's firestorm and the quotes from his dad, which I largely agree with, which we can get to shortly. I am
Hmm.
curious, when you approached Caleb Williams about the book, was he open to it? Because him and his family seem like very interesting folks, forward thinking. Cowherd, who I work with, knows the family
Hmm.
well, and he's told me some stuff. I'm interested in them, and because how did you get them on board for the book, and what was their pushback?
Well, when I reached out to Caleb through USC back in when I first started working in the book, which was really the spring of 2023. So he
Okay.
had, just come off that great season. And he was definitely an American king. And plus, the things he was doing with NIL, I thought was really interesting. He was kind of the first
Mm-hmm.
professional amateur quarterback. And, so I visited with him, visited with some of the folks at USC, his high school, his dad, and then as the season went on, his last season at USC, it was a little up and down, and then when stuff was coming out about the draft, and he and his dad thinking about doing something similar to what Jack and John Elway did in 1983, which I write about extensively in the book, and what Archie and Eli Manning did in 2004, I thought it was just interesting.
Yeah. So there was like usually when a story pops of the magnitude that yours did last week, there's all kinds
Hmm.
of denials and pushback. I didn't hear a damn word from Shane Waldron or the Eberflus's camp. They all went silent because clearly it's all factual. And I am curious, how did you hear anything privately from anybody that was like, oh man, come on, how are you going to do me dirty like this?
No, I met with Carl, so everyone with the book that, that I got, a level of cooperation from, I tried my best to meet with them in person and fact check everything. And so the Williamses were part of that. I did that with Elway, Steve Young, Warren Moon, the Mannings. Um, and, so I think that like, it's funny, you do these stories and the first question everyone asks is, what's the reaction? And so it's kind of amusing. I'm not trying to go all Larry David on you, but like the reaction is me getting questions about what the reaction is.
That's a good one. And listen, I'm sure that privately there were some people unhappy. Ben Johnson handled it well. Hey, I wasn't here. We're just looking forward. I am curious, like the biggest knock on Caleb coming into the pros was too much backyard action, dude. Can he rein that in? And he
Mm.
didn't really rein it in as a rookie, but you could argue it was the coaching staff, the offensive coordinator, the quarterback coach. He just didn't get the support needed. Is that a fair assessment or no?
Well, I think there's a couple of things at play. So number one, I write a lot about the pro day, his pro day, and what goes into a pro day. Why do we even do them? They're kind of ridiculous, but the way he was trying to do it, and the way the people who were helping him do it, they were trying to tell a story with that pro day, and with Caleb in particular, I think that they wanted to try to show those who were there or erase any doubt that he was about all football. And I think that like when so much happened in his life so quickly. He won the Heisman Trophy. He got all the endorsements. He got so much notoriety. And, that is a seductive and dangerous place. And I write at length about that, about, what happens when you get that level of fame and how easy it is to let your day job slip a little bit. And I think that when they lost Caleb's last year at USC, they lost at home to Washington. And that was the game that he cried in his mother's arms, and he didn't meet with the press after the game. And so I think that a lot of NFL people were wondering, like, hey, look, that's not going to fly in the NFL. Like, it's not going to fly in for an organization, and it's definitely not going to fly in the locker room. Like, you need to be able to do that. And so when I was watching Caleb's first year, more than anything, in terms of like his fundamentals as a quarterback, I was really watching to see like how he handled himself. And I thought he handled himself excellently. Like he was put in some very compromising situations by that coaching staff, and he was accountable. He was a good leader. He never broke, and he was tough. I mean, he was a really tough player. And I think that you saw um, teammates respond to him in a way that I think is pretty unique. And I also think, not for nothing, that the hardest thing to do in the NFL is to throw in known passing situations. And he showed a talent for being able to do that. And I think that, you look at rookie years, it's rare that you have a Marino or a CJ Stroud or a Jaden Daniels. Most of these guys, it's about survival, and I think we can all say that he survived pretty well.
Yeah, no, he certainly held up. The whole question about quarterbacks is fascinating because I don't know if I talked to you leading up to Mahomes entering the draft, but nobody on earth, I don't care who they are, saw Mahomes being
Mm-hmm.
this good. Nobody in
Yeah.
the NFL. And it comes back to like, does the NFL still struggle to grasp what a quarterback can do in the NFL? Because like Brock Purdy, dead last pick in the draft, everybody passed on him, including the Niners.
Yeah.
And then,
Mm-hmm.
he turns out to be, I don't want to say a superstar, but looks like he could be a superstar. And he just got a
Mm-hmm.
massive contract. Lamar
Mm-hmm.
Jackson, end of the first round. You could do this forever. In your dealings around the book of what makes a quarterback, did you touch on at all, like why the NFL has struggled to identify that quarterback position?
Oh, absolutely. And, a lot of it goes back to the things that Carl Williams was worried about. And that's that, like, coaching matters, organization matters, infrastructure matters. Like, if Patrick Mahomes, the what if game, I mean, if he hadn't been taken by the Chiefs, he would have been taken by the New Orleans Saints and Sean Payton. So he probably would have turned out well no matter what.
Right.
But let's just say that, like, some sorry team had decided to trade
Carolina.
up and pick him. Right. I mean, Bryce Young, yeah, Bryce, he has no chance. I mean,
None.
how many coaches did he have in 2 years? Three, I think, total. Like, you have no chance when it's that type of situation. And so I think that Carl Williams saw that hurricane coming and wanted to figure out if there was a way, like Jack Elway did and like Archie Manning did, to give his son some sort of agency over his future employer. But look, it was Caleb who was driving this. He was the decision maker. He's a grown up, and Carl was willing to do whatever it took if that's what Caleb wanted. But at the end of the day, Caleb, after some apprehension, was sold on the Bears and really wanted to figure out a way to make it work there. But you're absolutely right. I mean, there's very few men who can throw footballs into the tight windows that we need in the NFL. And there's fewer people who can identify that talent and even fewer people who can coach it at a high level.
So that all leads up, and I know that you have Arch Manning in the book, and I'm sure that you're saving the best stuff for when the college football season approaches. But as soon as the 25 mock draft was done with the quarterback situation,
Yeah.
Shador, blah blah blah, it turned to 26, and almost as if it was a coordinated effect, a coordinated attack, not attack, but a coordinated effort from the Manning family. All I saw from reporters were, well, Arch Manning's probably not going to come out. I mean, Seth, it's very rare that like every reporter has the same thing on Arch Manning not coming out. I almost feel like it was coming from the Manning camp. Like they had this ready. Hey, man, don't put him in your mock drafts. He's not coming out. I personally think that's BS, but we'll see. He's making a ton of money in NIL. Is there anything you can at least tease on the Manning front that angle from the book?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I wasn't privy to, that level of reporting. I do think that, like, one of the, and this, I'm happy to talk about this, but like, when you become a quarterback, you're taking on responsibilities that are so much different than being a shortstop or a center fielder or a point guard, right? I mean, that's obvious. It's in this lofty cultural place. If you're a Manning and you do that, it's even more. It's that on steroids. And so when Arch decided that he wanted to be a quarterback, in each stage, those kind of critical stages, I think that the family has made decisions to slow things down a little bit. Like they didn't put Arch as high up against the top competition as they could have when he was a flag football quarterback. And I think that, one of the things I talk about in the book is that, like, he didn't want offers. Like I dive deep into the recruitment. And one of the things about the recruitment is they wanted it to be like a 1970s style recruitment with the head coach of the high school running point. They didn't want offers. They didn't want him having to tweet every 5 minutes that he was honored to get, an offer from Ole Miss. I'm just making that up.
Yeah.
And, they wanted to try to put a semblance of a protective bubble around him, knowing that there was this mania going on that, almost didn't even need him to exist. And, Archie Manning inadvertently kind of got it going because he said when Arch was a freshman that he was a little ahead of where Peyton and Eli were
Yeah.
when they were freshmen. And of that, of course, that was on CNN. I mean, that caught fire. What he meant was that neither Peyton nor Eli had started at Isidore Newman on varsity as a freshman. And that's what Arch was doing. So that's what the context of it was. But again, it was kind of a reminder that there was this mania that was going on. And one of the reasons why, I think Austin and University of Texas were appealing to him was that it was a big town. I mean, it's a city, and it's a place that like he can hide a little bit better than he would have been able to in Oxford, Mississippi.
Huh. Now what about I don't know if you got into this, but there was a lot of talk that when Quinn Ewers returned, Arch didn't want to sit another year. Maybe he'll transfer to Georgia and this team was going to offer him. Did you guys touch on any of that speculation or no?
I didn't write about it in the book, but I don't think he was leaving Texas. Like,
Yeah.
I think that was like, it again, like I said, it doesn't need a lot from him to even exist. And I think that people think that because he's Arch and because he's a Manning, that, everything has to be now and everything has to be on this accelerated track when, um, I think that he does a pretty good job of balancing what he's trying to accomplish immediately and kind of a longer term perspective.
So the interesting thing that I liked on the Williams angle, Caleb Williams, that merges with Arch is that the father essentially said, "Hey, man, this is an unconstitutional rookie contract. They have you for basically up to 8 years." Well, if guys like
Absolutely.
Arch Manning stick around until 22, 23 in college, you're locked into a team basically until you're 30
Hmm.
and your prime. And quarterbacks are now playing a little longer, but it does feel a little weird that they can lock you in that long. I am curious, where do you stand, Seth Wickersham, independent of all the reporting you did? Where do you stand on that? Do you think that's fair?
I don't think it's fair at all. I mean, you're talking about a sport where the average career spans 3 years and those prime earning years. Again, the reason that, Caleb didn't return to USC or go to another school where, he was offered a lot of money is that everybody wants the second contract. And, this is why where you get picked is so important because they have you locked up for your 4 year rookie contract, 5th year option. And then if they chose, they can franchise you for 3 straight years. So you can be 8 years into your NFL career before you hit the market. And that to me is wrong. Like,
Yeah.
but then again, it was a collectively bargained. And, I get into this in the book, but you had that time. I mean, this is probably around the time that you and I first did that interview. But remember, like quarterbacks were coming out and they were getting these huge deals, like Alex Smith, Jamarcus Russell, Matthew Stafford, they were getting these monstrous deals, and they were, it was causing problems all the way
Yeah.
around. And like, good for the quarterbacks to get what they could. Good for Tom Condon, who negotiated a bunch of them and kind of became this super agent in that time. But they were messing up a lot of things, I think, within the construct of a team that ended up making things harder on the quarterback in the long term. And I
Mm.
think that in 2011, when the league and the union got together to, finalize a new collective bargaining agreement, and it was a tough negotiation. One of the things that went in there was the rookie wage scale. And I think that the idea of a rookie wage scale, I understand it. What they're trying to do is shift that money to the veterans. Now, how has that worked out? I'm not exactly quite
Yeah.
sure. I think it's more of a mixed perspective.
Yeah. We could wrap up with this. I don't know, Seth. Like, I do love the NFL. I don't obviously love some of these contract situations for quarterbacks, but I cannot get over the Shador Sanders slide. A, did you
Hmm.
touch on any Shador in the book, or is he just no? And did you approach him or anything? And then B, were you surprised that he plummeted to the fifth round?
I saw Shador play when he was like 7 years old when I was doing a Deion Sanders profile for ESPN the
Wow.
magazine. But he wasn't someone that I wrote about at length in the book. You see the sign behind me. It says "Go Buffs." I mean, I
Yes.
was born in Colorado. I grew up half my life in Boulder, half
Mhm.
my adolescence, and I watched Shador a lot. I thought he was a phenomenal player. When Peter King watched USC, so Caleb Williams versus Colorado in Boulder, he thought Shador was a better pro prospect than Caleb Williams, and I think that once he kind of was falling out of the second round, it was pretty obvious that the league looked at him like a project, whether that's fair or not. And then after that, it's what baggage comes with the project, and that's, can he be an understudy? Can he be under the radar? Can his dad, who's, such a famous figure and has coached him his entire life, deal with him being a backup, maybe being a third stringer? I think those are the questions that came into play. And I think that like for Shador, as awful as draft day or as the draft process might have been, I think that like the benefit in the long run, if there is one, is that it gives him a chance to earn the job outright rather than have it handed to him. And I think that players in the locker room respect that so much more than when a guy comes in straight out of college and is just kind of handed that job. I think that's a tough position for a lot of quarterbacks to be in. I write about it in the book, and I think that like Shador having to work his way up the depth chart in the long run will probably help him.
That's a reasonable take, and that's what he does. Seth Wickersham. Not that he's a take guy, but that's a pretty. I haven't heard that angle. Like in the long run, this is probably better for him to start at 4. I don't know, maybe 5, depending on where Deshaun Watson
Yeah,
is in a couple
well,
months.
so this is this interesting thing, and I mean, you've probably talked about it, but like, there's this entire economy for quarterbacks in the NFL who have been broken and managed to find a way to hang on. And if it's like Geno Smith and Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield to a certain extent, these guys who like they got to play right away. Then it didn't work out with that team for whatever reason, often because of structural reasons beyond their control, especially with Darnold, and they're able to like take a step back. And then when they maybe join a team that has some better coaching, they're able to look at the game and it just comes so much slower and answers are there that they didn't see before. I think that like someone like Will Levis could be somebody like that in the future if things don't work out in Tennessee, where, he played for a year and a half. He made some awful turnovers last year. Obviously, it got on the coach's nerves, but like he's shown he can play in the NFL. He can make some pretty impressive throws. If like things don't work out for him in Tennessee and he goes somewhere else where there's better coaching and a better infrastructure and the spotlight's not on him, it gives him a chance to kind of like work his way back into that second chance. And I think that it's not exactly analogous to Shador, but I think that the path is kind of the same where it's not the straightest path ever, but I think that in the long run, it'll benefit him.
Yeah, it feels like a Baker Mayfield, in Cleveland, like
Mm-hmm.
really bottomed out, that bounced around the league. Now he's back to being like an all-pro. All right, Seth
Exactly.
Wickersham, ESPN, great stuff, Seth. I'm waiting for the next big domino to fall in your book, and we'll hopefully be able to get you back on the pod.
Thanks, man. Good to see you.